In the name of the one, holy, and undivided Trinity, amen. What happens when a metaphor dies? Or let me ask this question. How many of us in this room personally know a shepherd? Yeah, me either. I've been thinking about this since looking at the readings for St. Anselm, whose feast day is this week. Anselm was born in 1033. He was a Benedictine monk. He was eventually the Archbishop of Canterbury. And he's the man who gave us what's called the satisfaction theory of atonement. His model for the relationship between God and humankind was that of a feudal lord relating to a vassal. In this system, in this time, the Lord owned the land and provided military protection for the vassals, and the vassals often had a parcel of land that they agreed to work for the Lord in return for that protection. In Anselm's formula, human sin, originally committed with Adam and Eve, deprived God of honor. It stripped God of honor. And Christ's death, which was done in perfect obedience, repaid that honor and in surplus, since he gave more than he needed to. He basically pays the part of our honor debt that we cannot repay. And this is based on an idea that a vassal cannot adequately repay a lord, that the imbalance in that relationship is so great that an offense that a vassal commits against a lord would take an immense amount of work to repay, even if the same action were committed by the lord to the vassal. Does that make sense? So this was actually a bit of an improvement upon the ransom theory of atonement, which held that Jesus' death paid the ransom to Satan. We were in a hostage situation, to satisfy the debt humankind had incurred in rejecting God and sin. Anselm's theory is not punitive. It's not Christ being punished with crucifixion because we've been bad. It's about sacrifice, voluntary sacrifice, offering. An offering of honor to repay our debt. This system made sense to people used to thinking about lords and vassals, for whom that was a common, normal, and natural relationship. That system of debts and mutuality and repayment was normal to them. And vassals and lords were considered almost different tiers of being. There's a clear hierarchy there, and that made sense for people to think about human beings and God as different tiers of beings, different kinds ontologically of beings. And while explicit feudalism is something we're not in contact with anymore, we still use these ideas and this language. It might be interesting to count sometime the number of times we use the word Lord in a typical service. Because that's a job title. It's a job title of a job that we don't encounter anymore. It's interesting that that metaphor has stuck so firmly to our theology. And perhaps we don't appreciate it, especially in relationship to how we understand our relationship to God, especially since Jesus' common reference to God was Abba, which is a chummy, familial reference. It's closer to daddy than it is to father. It's a tender familial relationship, very different from lord and vassal. And this too, this emphasis on lords, is a little bit like what happens with us and shepherds. It's not a job we see people doing anymore. We don't have daily experience with shepherds. Shepherding wasn't a particularly respected job. It was a bit of a grunt job. It was lower class. It was rural. It had to be done by someone, but it wasn't really something you wanted to be when you grew up. It wasn't aspirational. It took skill, for sure, and involved care and protection. It made sense to the people hearing it, and it would have been slightly shocking in its lack of reputation. What happens when a metaphor dies? Can you think of a job that we have now that's done pretty much under the radar, that everyone needs, but no one aspires to, that just keeps the wheels turning? There's a group of scientists who have started to think about this a little bit, and they have noticed that we in the US in 2016 are obsessed with innovators. We're very invested in visionary ideas and creative leaps and disruptive realities, superstars, right? You know, Bill Gates in his apocryphal garage. And this band of researchers who are starting to hold conferences and talk about this say they have nothing against innovators. It's just that these other people, what they call the maintainers, the people who do the boring work, the domestic labor, the washing up, the building maintenance, the child care, do so much more for our society. They say the vast majority of technologies that surround us and underpin our lives are not innovations. And the vast majority of labor in our culture is not focused on introducing or adopting new things, but on keeping us going. Is it easy or is it strange to think about God the maintainer? About God doing the quiet, boring work of keeping the world going, rather than something spectacular and wild and different. To think of God more like the cashier at Rite Aid than an omniscient Bill Gates. That might be the Easter news of Shepherd Sunday today. God works a basic, normal, boring job. Little glamour, low pay. Lovely scenery and nice company, though. God is maintaining the world in the world. And perhaps this week we might pray for the people we meet that get glossed over by the world, whose hands are tending the things we need. Maybe the person who mops the floor of our grocery store, the person staffing the 24-hour 7-Eleven, the person who collects the mail for their next-door neighbor who's on vacation, the grandparent looking after grandchildren while their child works, the person holding the flag in the middle of the road telling us to go around the construction workers, the tired secretary. Our shepherds This might also be the week to think about which metaphors we personally have deeply internalized about God. Which analogies and titles feel natural and normal to us, and why? Which pictures of God have deep personal meaning for us, and why? And are they related to anything or anyone we see in our daily life? Can we worship a God who's a secretary or a gas station attendant? I have yet to see an icon of one. Can we worship a God who maintains, without fanfare, the good of the world, who tends it and grows it without notice or acclaim, who moves through the world comfortable with their level of invisibility and disrespect, and does the work anyway, to the best of their ability? How can a very, very big God work in this very, very small way? I think these are the questions of Good Shepherd Sunday, and at its very root, the questions of the Incarnation itself. And a challenge to us as we continue to live out Easter in our task of recognizing the great rejoicing at the heart of all that is, made live and present in the smallest pieces of our lives. Amen.